Hello, Lucas. Thanks for joining us in Scouted by Graby. I really appreciate you giving us your time to talk about Ecorbeo and all the innovation that you guys are working on. And with that, again, for our readers, I'd like to start with the introductory question that I usually ask is basically, what is Ecorbeo? And what, if you have to explain it to me in simple language, so what is Ecorbeo and what are you guys doing?
Yeah, sure. Happy to start. Thanks so much, Shabazz. Ecorbio is a clean tech startup. We're based in Cyprus, where we do R&D to develop technologies to offset and decarbonize various chemicals in the industry. So, as many polymers, many materials are used today, they're still produced using fossil derivatives. What we do is we want to replace these ingredients with ones that are more sustainable. And that's basically the nutshell.
It sounds very niche and very core to the industry. So again, naturally, my follow up question that's coming up in my head is, what are the areas basically? Which chemicals are we talking about, and how is it affecting, you could say, me as a normal consumer who goes about my day? So please take
Yeah,
me through
yeah,
this
of
as well.
course. Of course, we chose to start with polyurethane. It's a type of polymer that's used in many different sectors. So you can, I'm sure that if you look around, you'll see something with polyurethane. So it's in our materials, in our cars, in our furniture. It's everywhere. And two markets that we're now looking at are one of the biggest, let's say, consumers of polyurethane. This would be the construction and the building sectors. So essentially, many buildings are thermally insulated using polyurethane, whereas many appliances that we have in our houses, such as refrigerators, heaters, it's also insulated with polymers. So essentially, we're trying to take this segment and make it more sustainable so that producers of these materials or these appliances have an option to kind of decrease their footprint, upstream, choosing more sustainable waste derived chemicals instead of ones that are made of petroleum.
I can already imagine how big of this industry is. And since you mentioned, cars, refrigerators, and lots of electronics, and even insulation in the house, would you like to share some kind of scale that I can basically imagine, like at what scale this problem is happening, and basically what kind of impact Ecorbeo can bring?
Yeah, of course, of course. So when we're talking about these specific chemicals, these ingredients, one example is polyol. So polyol is a key ingredient into polyurethane. It's kind of like a cake if you imagine it. So it's the flour equivalent, one of the major ingredients. And this type of chemical itself is, let's say, a 35 plus billion market globally. So it's around 11 megatons, so 11 million tons every year. Obviously, it's still growing, especially in the global south, where we're seeing more construction, more emphasis of energetic efficiency in buildings and appliances. But the segment that we're really interested in is the bio segment. So, the more sustainable alternatives to these chemicals. And this already comprises 10% of the global market, so around, 3.5 to 4 billion. And actually, this segment is the one that's really accelerating, growing at more than 10% each year. And this is something that we want to obviously push to make sure that this bio segment is not only more sustainable, but also, let's say, better in terms of supply chains, right? That it's the materials, the feedstocks that we use are not food competitive. They don't need more land to be grown, right? And compete with critical resources such as land and water on the side of production. So yeah, it's a growing field, and definitely new innovation is needed, and we're happy to be one of the solutions.
Okay. Lucas, when you say one of the solution, are there other solutions as well who are targeting a similar problem or who have similar products?
There are, yeah, I'm happy to share a bit more about how the competitive landscape looks like too, because obviously this is a sector that's quite. It has a long history, right? This polymer is being produced for a long time. There are large industrial players that produce high quality products for this, and there's many innovations ongoing as well. So, for example, I'm pretty sure that in the future we'll be talking a lot more about chemicals derived from CO2, for example, that is captured from the atmosphere or at industrial sites. But this technology is still quite too expensive and not commercialized yet. So In the meanwhile, there are a few companies like ourselves who are developing methods to convert and upcycle waste into chemicals instead of going through, either virgin feedstock or fossil feedstocks. So, companies like ours are looking at different waste streams. So this could be, of course, geographically relevant, right? Like in the global north, you would see a lot of forestry residues, for example. So different feedstocks, different approaches, and different technologies are involved to upcycle these chemicals or these waste biomasses into those target chemicals. But yeah, we're excited to see what's next in this field.
Okay. Is there anything, and I'm very curious about the topic. I'm sorry for, just machine gunning you with questions. But this, when I read about Ecorbeo, and when I read how you guys are like changing a very core part of a lot of industry, which is
Mhm.
like polyols and polyethylene. So it made me really curious about understanding, the technical challenges that you might have faced. And since this is such a huge industry, as a startup and specifically as a growing startup, there must be a lot of expansion challenges as well, because any big player can easily produce, I mean, can overtake, and it's very challenging to compete with big players. So basically, what is that USP that is, driving Ecorbeo and basically your innovation, and it's setting you apart from those already existing solutions?
Our USP and our major focus is to make sure that these upcoming bio alternatives are affordable. As we see that, these industries, especially the likes of construction, are very cost sensitive. So even though they have to become more sustainable due to, societal pressure, regulatory frameworks coming in, but that price premium that typically green products fetch is simply not feasible. So our USP is to make sure that the products that or technologies that we develop are scalable regionally, and of course without losing the sustainability, price competitive. So we want to be way cheaper than the bio alternatives, but price competitive even with imported fossil polyol. So this is a target that we have. But as you mentioned, technological struggles or challenges is something we deal with every day. So for instance, since this is such a, let's say, almost a commodity size market, scaling is an issue, right? We want to be selling at high scale already from day one. And the industrial partners that talk to us, they're happy to see our pilot progress, but they want thousands and millions of tons. So it's that tricky part of going from 0 to 100 is what we're now working on.
But I think it's a good problem to have, right? That your customers are already like waiting for you to produce on scale. uh,
Mm.
so basically, again, I'd like to understand it a little bit more deeper. So what kind of scaling issues are we talking about here? So I understand it could be a feedstock issue as well, because you guys are upcycling. And please correct me if I got that right. So you're upcycling already spent materials to basically to produce a more sustainable alternative to polyethylene and polyols. So I can already, do you see the scaling issues because of feedstock, or is it because of the production complexities, or it basically, I'd like to know more about, this challenge that you're mentioning.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, our process or even our development from day one was to ensure that we don't have, let's say, serious supply chain issues, right? So that's why we try to integrate with different industries and make sure that the waste feedstocks that we utilize are available at an industrial scale already. So um, we're luckily not going to have too many issues scaling up the supply chain in that sense. But the tricky part for us is the capital. To be honest, it's really difficult to get, for example, early stage investment that's quite capital intense. Because in our case, of course, there is a technology involved. So before we establish those strong industrial partnerships where we could, for example, integrate in a kind of symbiotic way, industrially in a biorefinery way, we first need to demonstrate at large scale, and this has a cost. And in the current, let's say, landscape of financing, it's pretty tricky because obviously the risk is still there, technological risk, market readiness risk. So that's kind of the tricky part to really figure out how to demonstrate in a cost-effective way and validate that feasibility at, let's say, a demo scale.
Understood. And you also mentioned that your team almost face a lot of technical challenges every day, almost
Mhm.
every day. So k- I'd love to hear some of those challenges. What kind of technological or innovation challenges you face to make this work, make Ecorbio a possibility?
Yeah, and it's a good thing. I mean, it's a great thing to have these challenges because that makes our learning curve pretty steep, but hopefully rewarding. So, a couple of, let's say, higher level topics that we're working on and developing is, first of all, of course, the quality of the end product, right? So, since we start off with like really low value waste feedstocks, that means it's tricky for us to attain that consistent and high quality at the end downstream level. So that's why we're also partnering with different research organizations to kind of boost our capabilities and try and develop different end use formulations. So polyurethane products where we can have the most impact by, replacing fossil ingredients in. So that's one. And then kind of attached to it, I would say downstream processing is also a big topic. So this is typically a part of the production line, which is quite, again, capital intense. There's quite a lot of R&D specifically on downstream processing, topics such as separation, upgrading. So this is another topic that's quite heavy in terms of R&D, and we're still working on, and they're quite linked. So essentially, how to make sure the end product quality is high without losing those potential profit margins.
I'd like to know the other aspect of this question as well, which is like more into the scientific approach behind your processes, and basically the when I say technical challenges and innovation challenges, this is more to do with like how did you make it work, like using a spent uh, materials to instead of using fossil fuels. So
Mm.
what were the challenges that your team had to figure out in that making that process work? Uh, because and of course you're doing it on a like a price competitive scale, so I'm sure there must have been some technical challenges your team must have solved, because as you mentioned, usually green and sustainable product comes with a premium price tag, which is something you're also trying to avoid. So
Yeah.
that is like I'd like to understand the behind the things and the scientific side of your innovations. Yeah.
Sure, sure. So, as many industrial development projects, it started at lab scale. So trying to figure out which types of feedstocks work, what kind of process conditions are necessary. But even at that stage, we were already thinking of the next step. The integration, the pilot scale. So we try to tailor the conditions so that they're as mild as possible. Without disrupting potential supply chains. So not introducing any, let's say, exotic catalysts or expensive downstream processing conditions. So we always try to make sure that the process conditions and parameters are aligned with existing industries so that it's easier to integrate either on the supply chain or also physically, by, for example, co-hosting and sharing some of those infrastructures. So along the lines, when we were, for example, piloting the process, there were a lot of lessons learned on topics such as, for example, pre-treatment, right? What specific parameters the feedstocks have to comply with. So be it, things like particle size or composition, that kind of thing. So this was quite critical, and it took us quite a lot of time. So moving from the lab all the way to pilot scale, it took us a couple of years, and really that scaling up really gave us a facility or a platform to figure out these things at a scale that is commercially relevant. So making sense of the production costs. It enabled us to get a realistic external LCA performed, so we know what to expect when we're scaling. So these kind of steps, growing from lab all the way to pilot, was really helpful, and we saw the differences, right? Because there's always some sort of difference working at these different scales. And on the downstream, we're still working on it. We're still developing now the formulations, the different end products of the polyurethanes. And here too, collaboration is key, as we found. We can't do it alone. So we're in
Mhm.
discussion with both polyurethane producers, but also industries that are manufacturing, for example, polyols themselves. So, they know the technology, they know the direction that these materials should take next. And of course, research, ongoing collaboration with universities and research centers is something that helps us to essentially to accelerate and to catch up with all of these industry giants that have been, in the field.
Okay, and I mean this makes a lot of sense, and I can understand the technical challenges your team has faced, specifically the things that you mentioned about like particle sizes and the actually compatibility also in various industries. You guys are
Mhm.
testing out with new formulations as well. Are there any regulatory or policy level challenges as well from maybe that you have to face from government bodies? For example, in Europe, uh, a lot of focus is on sustainability and new materials to be used in electronics. So uh, is there a challenge that your team has faced related to regulatory or policy conditions, or are they acting in favor of your products and basically helping you grow, bring more like awareness in front of your customers?
Yeah, that's a great point that you make. It's actually good. I mean, we're happy with the new policies coming in, with the push, at least in Europe, for more sustainable materials, for circular economy. These are topics that we were well aligned with even in the beginning. And then, of course, compliance is something that is quite strict in Europe and something we have to abide by. So, for example, in our case, we want to start selling at small volumes by the end of next year. So, this coming 12 months will be for us to make sure we have all the paperwork needed, make sure our facilities certified, everything like that. But in general, these new policies are helpful also to kind of level the playing field a bit, because until recently we've seen a lot of imports that it's really difficult to match the prices. But hopefully this focus on real sustainability and traceability in terms of footprint data is going to help. But yeah, it really depends on the region you are in. I know that probably your readers are from all over the globe, so it's really dependent on where you are, where you're producing, and where you want to sell. So we definitely know that the Southeast Asian region is one that's growing the most at the moment, and probably will be predicted to grow the most in this kind of chemical sector. So it's something that we also need to be better at understanding and following the framework developments, the policies that are coming in. We definitely know that some countries in the region that are taking up the sustainability flag and really carrying it. So we're happy to see those developments too.
Understood. And I think, of course, Europe is like way ahead in terms of these kind of regulation around sustainability and recyclability compared to other countries. So, but is and now that you mentioned that Southeast Asia is also a preferred geography you want to target, right? So, do you see similar regulations helping Ecorbeo's products into in Southeast Asia type of region? Are there any specific regulations that you help your clients become more aligned with, or that address? In Europe there are like lots of like there's regulation around green packaging, and there's regulation around recyclability as well. In different countries there are different, so any particular regulation or policy that you guys are helping help your client be more aligned with in Southeast Asia or other geographies?
There are some let's say more national level incentives and initiatives in several countries, but not something as I would say uniform and unified as in and the European Union. But we're definitely seeing, for example, even countries such as China. You used to think that sustainability is far from their agenda in the
Yeah.
manufacturing sector, but they're going to be the leaders in sustainability. I'm pretty convinced from what I've seen on the ground, from the developments, from the amount of financing also available, and yeah, so Europe, even though it had a really good head start by making sure that the regulation is strict and enforced, now it faces a different issue where just for example, the lack of financing, relative lack, is something that's slowing down deep tech, highly innovative development. So it's going to be a different kind of race, and we'll see who wins out in the short term. But in the long term, I think whoever makes a lot of progress in climate space and in the sustainability space, we all win, right? So it's
Yeah.
a common goal that we're all following. So I'm happy to see these developments and a lot of support in other regions as well.
Okay, and Lucas, now that you mentioned, in long term, of course, if a lot of companies focus on sustainability, so everyone wins, right? So uh, what I'd like to know, and this is again, I'm asking you as a CEO of Ecorbeo, what is the driving force behind Ecorbeo? Is it the sustainability, green, bringing, like making planet more greener? Is it like solving the technical challenge of this industry of replacing this material, or is there something else? So basically, what's driving Ecorbeo and basically you personally to take this forward and take this challenge?
Yeah, it's a great question. We could have started with that one, but at the end, it's the purpose is to make a significant positive environmental impact. So of course, along the way, it has to be sustainable, not only for the company, but also for wherever we're working. So we're, putting a lot of emphasis on not only having an impact or a measurable, in our case, CO2 or greenhouse gas avoidance, but also making sure that, we focus on the team, we focus on making sure that we have sustainable processes in mind, and of course having that open mind, because this is just a first product for us, a first technology, but we want to make sure that sustainable financial state allows us to look beyond this and into other and new products. So this is, yeah, just the beginning for us, I believe, and I hope that we can achieve this mission of ours, which is, I think, as for all ambitious startups, it just keeps growing. The ambition and
Yeah.
the goal just keeps growing and becoming bigger.
It's good to know, and I really like your approach towards things, especially related to growth. And I can already see you already you think very systematically about scaling up, and your focus is a lot on scaling and expanding, which is which is a great quality I've seen in a lot of CEOs and lot of startups I've talked to. Uh,
Okay.
so, and I always am fascinated by hearing these responses of different CEOs I have talked to over the time. So, Lucas, how have been the reaction of your customers? In case if you can share an example, I'm sure. I mean, no need to mention any name, but I'd like to. I'm interested in hearing. Is there any specific number or tangible outcome that you can share with our readers, or in general, what has been the reaction after seeing basically, you could say, adopting Ecorbio solution in their product lines?
Yeah, I'd say that in general, potential customers in our case would fall into two broad categories. So on one hand, you would have the, let's say, medium to large producers. So these are companies that are typically quite a lot. They have a lot of vertical integration. They have their supply chain quite on, work on it quite closely, and they typically are already on board with the sustainability. They have their own goals. They have their targets. So they are actively looking for solutions. And on the other side, you would have either the smaller or, smaller to medium sized producers. These are not necessarily yet looking actively for sustainability solutions. Instead, they're much more cost driven. So I would say that's kind of the divide. So one would really focus on the footprint, the reduction. How can we push this even more? And the other would really focus on the cost still, because that's kind of the limiting factor for them. But something that unifies them, besides the scale, is quality. No one wants or can compromise on the quality. So this is something that has to be addressed by every competitor, every producer in the field. So whichever segment or sector you choose, be it construction, automotive, you will have your own standards for different materials, and this is something that there's no negotiation on that. The end materials, however sustainable, however cheap or otherwise, they still have to meet these standards and comply with the especially safety and security requirements. So this is a non-negotiable. And then I think for us, it's a conversation between some clients are, let's say, more focused on the green already actively, whereas others, I think, they will wait until the regulatory enforcement is in place and they have to source more sustainably. So until then, with them, the conversation would be about savings of costs.
Okay, so cost saving, if I have to summarize it, so cost saving and customizability of the product is
Mm.
something that is perceived very well by your customers.
Yeah, yeah,
Have I?
yeah.
Okay, okay. So Lucas, also when I was reading about Ecorbeo, and I looked a mention of patent pending process, uh, which I mean, it makes sense. Of course, there's a lot. Your team has figured out a new solution of a very niche problem, and a lot of scientific expertise are needed to implement this. So, apart from patents, is there other type of protection or other type of ways you basically have adopted to protect your innovations, or basically uh, cover this?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, good news. Maybe we need to update our website, but the patent has been granted. So at least in some
Oh.
geographies, we're already quite protected. We're trying to expand this patent to other, strategic locations that are relevant for us. But yes, that's one thing, and then a lot of the work that's being done at the pilot facility, of course, grows our kind of know-how, and there is a lot behind the scenes in terms of technical know-how. So not only the, let's say, control and automation side of things, but also these kind of details that we were talking about even now, about the feedstock, about the different processes involved, and so there is a lot of work involved, and I'm happy that not only on paper we have the IP, but also in the people in our team, right? And that's something that we
Hmm.
want to keep developing.
Okay, and congratulations on your grant of the patent. Uh,
Thanks.
I can already imagine more patents coming up along your way as your team solves new challenges. So it's very exciting to hear that as well. Uh, so Lucas, and again, these are like towards the end of our conversation. Actually, I've got to already know a lot of stuff, new stuff from you, and what I now want to ask is, uh, since this is a very niche industry, and it's full of competitors as well, as you mentioned, and this the problem is very niche. It's difficult to communicate it to a normal person, like why this is impactful, why you should like, think about this. So during your journey from start to finish, and you mentioned that it took you a couple of years to really figure out and the scalability thing of your first solution. During all this journey, did you ever feel like maybe this is not going to work, or maybe this is difficult to implement, or that giving up thought? So how did you fought it, and how are you like continuing this?
Wow, that's a great question. I didn't expect this one. Yeah, it's something that I think of quite often, actually. I mean, we have these challenges all the time. We have obstacles, barriers, and they typically are quite unexpected. So as you might imagine, there's many uncertainties involved in entrepreneurship, especially when you're trying to develop something quite disruptive in a conventional, let's say, market. Um, but I think what's the best is the team that really surrounds me. So we always have different perceptions, we always have different ideas. So I think it's really helpful to bounce these concerns and ideas of your teammates, of your co-founding team, your advisors, and they can give you a fresh perspective. So one day, let's say, I will be a bit more upset and perhaps see the difficulties more than the opportunities. But on the same day, we have a lot of people who are making progress, are developing the technology, and are very much optimistic and see new opportunities. So obviously, maybe in 5 years, we'll have another chat, and maybe we'll be doing something a bit different. But I think pivoting and making use of new opportunities is what is necessary in this field. So right now, our focus is to make sure that we build up a strong team, make sure that we have these conversations, have these doubts out in the open, and then I think it makes us a bit stronger in the end.
Okay, and so basically, so team is your strength, and basically discussing with team and looking at their ideas. If you see a roadblock at one place, but there's a opportunity and success
Mm.
at some other place in your team, and
Yeah,
this
for
is very
example,
inspiring to hear.
you might not see it right at the moment, but then from another angle, it might look a bit different. So I think these different perspectives, and especially when you try to include different perspectives, even from different kinds of people. So you want to make sure that your team is diverse, not only technically but also in terms of lived experiences. And I think it's as the saying goes, 1 plus 1 is 3. I think it could be even more.
No, actually, I've seen this. I've seen this a question being. I asked this question to almost all the CEOs I have talked to, and this is like one of my favorite question, because
Mm.
I don't just ask it for Scouted by Gravy. I ask it to take some personal inspiration for myself,
Mm.
and I've seen this trend. A lot of CEOs of startups which are working in a niche industry, a challenging area. Some they're working on some breakthrough. They they have mentioned that how important it is to have a good team and a motivating team to keep you going. And now hearing you say similar things, it strengthens the idea that okay, team is one of the like biggest factor in success of a startup, which I feel like you are already doing very well on. uh, just
I
I
mean, it's a safeguard. It's something that really can make you stronger, I think, and it doesn't take away from the fact that yes, it can be very difficult, personally, but yeah, it also takes a special kind of person to engage in this type of work. So I think
yeah.
it's a process every founder has to go through and then assess whether this is something they're up for.
It's nice. And Lucas, so again, for my final question, what's on the horizon for Ecorbeo, maybe next 1 year or 3 years? So, what are the next challenges your team is planning to pick up?
Yeah. So besides the one we're talking about, making sure the quality of our product is improved. So continuous R&D, that's one. We're upgrading our pilot facility so that we can actually sell at low volumes next year. So that's exciting, of course. Market entry, kind of product market fit at local markets. That's very exciting. And then, yeah, fundraising, making sure we can grow. So these are kind of the three topics for us next year.
Great, great. Good to hear this. And I'm sure we get to talk much before than 5 years, like you mentioned. I'll definitely follow up on this. And so, Lucas, like with that, that was the end of my questions. And I really, really appreciate you giving me this time and taking me through this process.